Good morning, everybody. Thank you for affording me this opportunity to share with you. Just at the beginning, I want to give thanks and pay tribute to the life and the ministry of Marge Bass, amongst others, but particularly Marge, whose life song devotional you can read about on page 91 of those devotional books, because she epitomizes in that devotional very much what I want to share this morning. So I thought it would be appropriate for me to pay tribute to her. But this is very much, as Mark prayed, this is a message that I have had on my heart for a while. So I share it hopefully in faith that it might have some resonance for somebody. So once upon a time, there was a computer brand called Compaq. It was one of the largest sellers of PCs in the entire world in the 1980s and the 1990s. But in 2002, Hewlett-Packard came along and it gobbled it up as part of its strategy to increase its market share. In 1985, Blockbuster was founded, and it was also very popular across the USA, so that once upon a time as well, it was opening up a new store every 17 hours. And it had something like 4,000 stores across the whole of Europe, Canada, and South America. But the rapid rise of digital services such as Netflix and online retailers like Amazon made Blockbuster's video and DVD model obsolete, and it was auctioned in 2011. Enron Corporation, an energy, commodities, and services company, was named by Fortune as America's most innovative company for 6 consecutive years. At the end of 2001, its financial condition was sustained by institutionalized, systematic, and creatively planned accounting fraud, and it filed for bankruptcy, dragging the accounting firm Arthur Andersen into dissolution with it. And then closer to home, Samson Stutterford opened Stutterford's in 1858 with a vision to create a Harrods-like departmental store targeting the middle and upper income South African market. Its fall from grace coincided with the deep recession in 2009, sparked by the global financial crisis. So much for the introduction. The very simple and uncomplicated thesis of what I want to share this morning is that it's not how you start that matters, it's how you finish. It's not how you start that matters, it's how you finish. In last week's sermon, Kevin talked to this topic, and so I want to reinforce and talk very directly into that theme with a slightly different slant. And as Mark had prayed, and as I had said, it's been a topic that has been on my heart for a while. So let's just recap a little bit. In our life-song journeys through the book of Samuel, Saul literally and figuratively started out head and shoulders above his peers. But he didn't come close to finishing well. His disobedience, his arrogance, and his self-importance is very well documented. So what I want to do is just read a couple of selected verses for you from 1 Samuel 15. That's from verses 17 to 23, and I'm going to use the Message translation. It goes like this. Samuel told him, that Saul, when you started out in this, you were nothing, and you knew it. Then God put you at the head of Israel, made you king over Israel. So why did you not obey God? He wants you to listen to him. Plain listening is the thing, not staging a lavish religious production. Not doing what God tells you is far worse than fooling around in the occult. Getting self-important around God is far worse than making deals with your dead ancestors. Because you said no to God's command, he says no to your kingship. So Saul ended defeated, desperate, and he committed suicide, having lost his throne, his sons, and his heritage. His poor leadership is chronicled for posterity. And so I would give him an F grade for finishing. On the other hand, David, who was handsome and ruddy and a man after God's own heart, he had a more laudable ending. But his sons almost tore the kingdom apart because he had not appointed a successor, and his lack of control caused problems for Israel after he was gone. We could say he finished so-so, and I might give him perhaps a B grade finish. Over the past few months, we have listened to parishioners share their own life song. Many have been inspirational and testify to personal rescue, recovery, and restitution. And again this morning, unprompted, we heard another life story. It's almost like we can't quite close the chapter on this theme. Now others have been recorded in our Life Story Devotions book. But thankfully, it's not how you start that matters, nor if you fall off the wagon on life's journey, but it's how you finish. So what about the rest of us? Many of us could say, I attend church regularly on a Sunday. I'm involved in a cell group meeting. I tithe. I'm disciplined in daily Bible reading and prayer. I sing in the music group. I minister at Bambai. I even serve on parish council. But will you be standing strong at the end? The odds of finishing strong do not seem to be high. In Numbers 13, 1 and 2, under the leadership of Moses, God is about to hand over the promised land to the liberated nation of Israel after 400 years. Moses is asked to select 12 men, one from each tribe. These were not ordinary men. They were leaders, Israel's best and brightest, and they had been asked to spy out the land. These were men who started strong, who witnessed God open the Red Sea for their families to cross and then shut it on Pharaoh. But 10 of them capitulated because the land had powerful tribes and cities, and so entry was delayed as Israel circled a desert for something like 40 years. In an exhaustive study of approximately 100 biographies in the Bible, Howard Hendricks of Dallas Theological Seminary concludes that approximately 2/3 of these men and women ended poorly due to immorality, backsliding, or drifting from the faith. In my own experience, I have a few good friends who were leaders in youth, church, and parachurch groups, some even full-time, whose Christian lives have been wrecked by sexual affairs, modernism, and the things of the world. Last week, Kevin spoke about the lessons of actively waiting patiently on God, waiting intently and waiting with intentionality, as the antidote to the pit of individualism, the pit of fear of intimacy, and the pit of complacency. In our key text today, we read Paul's epitaph written to Timothy when he hands over the baton to the next generation of his community. In this text, we glimpse something of what it means to finish well. So I'll just read that text again for you. For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, would award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. For me, this text throws up at least 3 questions that I'd like to reflect on just very briefly. The first question then is, how should we live today? How should we live today? Looking around at his own situation, Paul viewed his whole life as a sacrifice. Using an Old Testament illustration of a sacrificial lamb on an altar, Paul sees himself as the quart of wine, the drink offering that we read about in Numbers 28, poured on top of this burning sacrifice. As the wine hits the burning coals, it evaporates, and it symbolizes his 100% commitment to the Lord. Nothing was held back. Paul could never be accused of complacency, unresponsive, living off past victories or others' relationships, or living secondhand. So how do you live today? At communion, will you offer yourself as a living sacrifice? Will you really offer yourself as a living sacrifice to be sent out to live and work to God's praise and glory? The second question then, what kind of legacy will you leave? What kind of legacy will you leave? When Paul looks back at the end of his own life, he is sitting in a dark, damp dungeon, which is reached only by a rope or ladder from a hole in the floor above him. He's living with the stench of his own urine and his excrement. There's absolutely no despair and no defeat as he recollects. And he uses three metaphors to describe his life song. Firstly, as a wrestler or as a boxer. As a wrestler or a boxer, he's contended with the stresses and the hardships of life. Life has been a struggle. He's been pummeled, but he's never stopped fighting. He has gone the full 15 rounds. We would say he lived a disciplined life, fighting the good fight for the cause of the gospel. Secondly, as a runner or athlete, Paul has trained for an ultramarathon and not just been a participant in the endurance race. He has persevered with the rigors and the monotony of pre-race training, and then he has followed the race day rules. One step at a time, with singular focus, he has finished the race victoriously. He's not been a winner, but he has finished the race victoriously. We might say he lived a directional life. And then lastly, as a steward who has kept the faith, Paul has steadfastly guarded his boss's deposit, the truth and the essentials of the gospel. There's been no compromise of the truth. When others fell away, he pressed on preaching. If the world was against him, he ignored the opposition. He never backed down. His was a doctrinal life. Are you engaging in safe or unsafe ways with God? What kind of legacy will you leave? Because you're busy laying its foundation right now. And then the last question that I think this text throws up for us, at least for me anyway, what kind of reward will you inherit? What kind of reward will you inherit? So we use this idiom, like there's no tomorrow, to mean something must be done as much or as quickly as possible without restraint or thought, as there won't be another opportunity. As I said this morning, for example, every time Kevin goes shopping, he spends money like there's no tomorrow. On the other hand, Paul lived in a manner with an eye on that day, the future. He couldn't see the finish line. None of us can. But in looking ahead, Paul was motivated to live today righteously. I understand this to mean that he lived each day faithfully, significantly, and with intention. In rowing terminology, his focus was on the coxswain. This is the person with a megaphone sitting at the end of the boat, facing the crew. Paul is looking, listening, and obeying the coxswain's commands as he paces and encourages the rowers to get across the finish line as strong as possible. Hence, Paul could be confident of receiving a crown personally from the Lord when he stands vindicated before the righteous judge on that day, instead of condemned by the unrighteous judge Nero, who would later have his head. What kind of reward will you inherit? So let me conclude, and in doing so, I want to read the last words of Steve Jobs, who died at age 56 of pancreatic cancer. A billionaire at age 56, but who died of pancreatic cancer. On his sickbed, this is what he said: "I reached the pinnacle of success in the business world. In others' eyes, my life is an epitome of success. However, aside from my work, I have little joy. In the end, wealth is only a fact of life that I am accustomed to. At this moment, lying on the sickbed and recalling my whole life, I realize that all the recognition and wealth that I took so much pride in have paled and become meaningless in the face of impending death. You can employ someone to drive the car for you, make money for you, but you cannot have someone to bear the sickness for you. Material things lost can be found, but there is one thing that can never be found when it is lost: life." It's not how you start that matters. It's how you finish. And so if life's not going well, and you're in a dark place or a deep pit, see life as a dress rehearsal with a whole life of potential ahead of you. In Paul's understanding, start fighting, start running, and start believing. And by the grace of God, you will finish strong. And if you're in a good place, keep fighting, keep running, keep believing. And by the grace of God, you will finish strong too. In the words of C.S. Lewis, you cannot go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. Amen.